one piece of advice you should take from me is wear sunscreen, wear sunscreen, wear sunscreen. Hello, I'm Dr. Vanessa Morgan. I'm a dermatologist here in Melbourne, and I have got the Mecca Versity team here at my clinic today to talk about all things SPF. I am very passionate about sunscreen and people protecting themselves from the sun, partly for health, but also from a cosmetic point of view. Nothing looks better on your face in your 40s than sunscreen in your 20s. Sun exposure is detrimental to everyone's skin in terms of photoaging, so development of dyspigmentation, uneven pigment, fine lines. Protecting your skin from that over the long term will lead to a much better outcome when you're older. When people want to know about skincare and how they're going to look good in the future, the thing that's going to make the most difference by far is sunscreen and sun protection. If you're not using that, it's a complete waste of time using any other type of anti-aging creams. So that's just from a vanity and cosmetic point of view. And of course, we're the skin cancer capital of the world, and we really need to ramp up our efforts for sun protection, particularly in younger people. When we're outside, we are receiving a large range of radiation onto our skin. So there's infrared, which is the heat, there's visible light, which is when the sun's out, and then there's UV, which goes from UVA, B and C. C doesn't really reach the earth, happily, because it is very, very damaging. UVA is the longer wavelength. It penetrates deeply into the skin and it definitely contributes to skin cancer and photoaging. UVB is a shorter wavelength. It's particularly the one that burns your skin. And again, it does age your skin and causes skin cancer. Once you've tanned, you've damaged your skin. And so tanning is a sign that the melanocytes, so the pigment cells, have become active. So they're going out on defense for you. And it doesn't significantly protect your skin from further damage once you're tanned. It is true that you've got a more olive skin tone, you will be a little bit more resistant to sun damage than someone who's very, very fair. Every time you sunburn, it does do irreversible damage, but you can come back from any point. Wearing sunscreen at whatever age you are and doing it consistently will make a very big difference to your skin now and into the future. Sun protection factor refers to how many times you can stay in the sun longer than the time it would take you to get burnt. So it will vary from person to person how long that would be. 30 plus is generally enough because you're not going to usually stay in the sun long enough to last out 2 hours, which is when the sunscreen is going to start to degrade anyway. So usually I say 30 plus or above is fine. The more important thing is that you're reapplying it frequently enough, so every 2 hours, and that you're using enough of it. SPF is the foundation of your skincare routine. Without that, the other creams are a waste of time. If you're using creams for an anti-aging purpose, the sunscreen is going to outweigh them in terms of their benefit. Your sunscreen is preventative and it will also reverse some visible signs of aging and also uneven pigmentation. You can get 95% of all you need with the sunscreen, and the rest is icing on the cake. I usually explain to people that sunscreen does 95% of all the work that creams can do. The next 4% is usually done by products that contain retinols and other chemical exfoliants, and then the last 1% by antioxidants. If you're not using SPF and you're using creams that have got alpha hydroxylic acids or retinols in them, you are reducing the SPF of your skin by about 2 because you're exfoliating. So it is really important that you've got that protection on board when you're using other products. Look at people's skin when you're judging how old they are. It's not just to do with lines, it's also to do with pigmentation. Pigmentation is very much driven by sun exposure, and people who are prone to chloasma or pigmentation really have to be extremely strict with their sun protection. So usually using double sunscreen, something with foundation in it, so they're blocking visible light, and that includes protecting even from light through glass as well. That's because of the emerging evidence that visible light as well as UVA damages the skin. And so if you've got something with some tint in it, particularly if it's got an ingredient called ferrous oxide, that helps to block visible light as well. So you're just getting that broader spectrum coverage. So if you find that you're using sunscreen and you're still getting your freckles darkening, you need to look at a different sunscreen. And also whether you're using enough of it and applying it frequently enough. Anytime your UV index is above 3, you should be wearing SPF. You do get UV through glass and also a little bit from light. So if you're really serious about anti-aging, then yes, you would use it as part of your routine in the morning. You may not need to top it up if you're indoors all day. So as a dermatologist, what I would do is I would use it instead of moisturiser every morning. If I was going to be out in the middle of the day, I would reapply it then. If I'm in for the full day, don't worry. The main thing that people do is that they underdo it. They're not using enough quantity of sunscreen. So if you only put on a small amount of sunscreen, you won't be approaching SPF 30. You might only have SPF 10. So the recommendation is for each region of your body, you have 5 mils of sunscreen. So the regions are face, front of your trunk, back of your trunk, 5 mils for each limb. So a full body application would be a shot glass, so 35 mils. The best sunscreen for you is the one that you like the feel of so that you'll wear it regularly. So in terms of whether you like a sunscreen or not, it'll be all about the base. And also it does depend a little bit on the sunscreen content. So some of the zinc-based formulas will leave a little bit more of a white shine. Not all of them do, but again, it's just looking for one that you like the look of on your skin. And everyone likes different levels of glow too. So, again, that's mostly to do with the base, but also a little bit to do with whether it's a physical or chemical blocker too. So a chemical sunscreen has got chemicals that absorb the UV and convert it into heat, not enough heat that you can feel. And then a physical sunscreen is something that will reflect the UV back. So the physical sunscreens normally contain zinc oxide or titanium dioxide. The chemical sunscreens, there's a large number of different chemicals that will absorb UVA. I think the ones that are physical, we do know that they're reliable at reflecting UVA. So as a consumer, if you pick a sunscreen that's got zinc or titanium dioxide in it, you'll know it's got good broad spectrum coverage. In Australia, we don't, on our labelling, let people know what the level of UVA coverage is. So when you're using a chemical sunscreen, it can be hard as a consumer to know how good that is at protecting you from UVA. A sunscreen in Australia has been TGA approved, which means it undergoes more stringent testing than a moisturiser that's got an SPF on it. So my preference is that people find a sunscreen that they like using, they like the feel of it, and that becomes their moisturiser rather than the other way around. But either is okay. It's just that you have got a little bit more security in the SPF testing on a sunscreen. If you need to top up during the day, then you can just pop it all over the top of your makeup. And again, it depends what you're wearing and how complicated your makeup is, what you're going to want to use. Definitely the most common reason people say they don't like sunscreen is they don't like the feel of it. So they haven't found one that they like the base of, basically. So I usually give a recommendation of a few different ones. Always go for the lighter ones. So the ones that are formulated for acne-prone skin are often very well tolerated by people who don't like that feel of something sitting on their skin. There are some people also complain of eye irritation, so if they're sweating with it running into their eyes. Again, trying a physical blocker is good for those people. It's less likely to be irritating. And again, trying a wide range of different brands to see what suits them best. But skin sensitivity, it's really hard because if you've actually got an allergy, it could be to a large number of different ingredients, not necessarily the sunscreen. And sometimes you can work that out yourself by trial and error. Sometimes you need allergy testing to find out which one it is if you really can't find anything that suits you. So sunscreens are made up of a base, so basically a moisturiser, and then the active ingredients. Ones that say for oily skin will be generally better for breakout prone skin. So sensitivity is very individual. Again, physical sunscreens are slightly less likely to be allergenic than chemical sunscreens, but that's not across the board. But if you really still can't find a sunscreen that suits you, you can have testing done to see what you're allergic to. And the other thing to be mindful of, some people are actually almost allergic to the sun. So if you're finding that you're reacting to a lot of different sunscreens, it may be that you're actually reacting to the sun and the UV that's getting through those sunscreens rather than the sunscreen itself. For someone who feels they've got sensitive skin, they're looking for an option, try a physical blocker and something that's low on fragrance to start with. Other methods of sun protection are very, very important. So wearing hats is so important, as is seeking shade and not trying to be deliberately in the sun. Organising your clothing so you're not having to apply so much sunscreen is also a good idea. Clothing, if you hold it up to light and you're not seeing too much sun coming through it, will generally be blocking UV. If it's sheer, it won't provide all that much protection. But if you have densely woven fabric, that's going to give you better protection than your sunscreen without you needing to worry about topping it up. So it's a good question. Majority of people are fine with their vitamin D levels, even if they're really strict with their sun protection. It does vary a lot from person to person how efficient their skin is at producing vitamin D. We used to always think that fair skinned people would be fine and dark skinned people wouldn't, but there's a lot of individual variations. So if you are wearing sunscreen really conscientiously and you want to double check on your vitamin D level, it's a good idea to get that checked at the end of winter. If you're normal at the end of winter, you'll be fine all year round. So there's no sensible reason for not using SPF. There's a large number of different bases that you can use. There's lots of different compounds that you can use if there's something that you feel concerned about. There's no medical worry about any of the sunscreens that are currently in use either. I don't understand it when people don't want to wear SPF, and I don't understand why anyone would spend their money on skincare if they're not using an SPF, because the rest of it's a complete waste of time if you're not protecting your skin in the first place. Okay, so we are the sunscreen capital of the world, and there's actually a melanoma epidemic. It's the commonest cancer under 39, and unless we do something about it, it's going to keep on getting worse. We have got increased UV exposure with global warming, hole in the ozone, and so if you don't protect yourself from the sun, you are really setting yourself up for a difficult time when you're older if you're fair-skinned. We know that currently 2 out of 3 fair-skinned Australians will develop a skin cancer, and 14,000 people are diagnosed with melanoma each year. It is potentially a preventable cancer, and it's particularly important that you're protecting your skin under the age of 20. So for the young Mecca customers, it is really, really important that they get the sun protection message and that they're looking after their skin. So one other thing I would like to see is people moving more towards liking their own skin tone and not trying to be lighter or darker than they actually are. And sunscreen helps you maintain what you've got. And I think until we can manage to get that cultural shift to happen, there's a real desire for fair-skinned people to tan, which is really harmful for them. Thanks very much for having me here on Meccaversity today. One piece of advice you should take from me is wear sunscreen, wear sunscreen, wear sunscreen.